Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. The Haunt of Love and Lies. Episode 5. Chapter 37. Killian's point of view. I stood frozen. It was like every blood in my body had drained. One felt so numb to the pain that choked my chest. My eyes scanned Sheila's face, pausing on her lips, then back to her eyes. My brows furrowed confusedly at her, observing her as if contemplating if Sheila was seriously just rejecting me. Her firm gaze and solemnity told me that she meant every word she said. She rejected me. But it's completely useless if I don't accept her rejection. The pain in my chest slowly morphed into anger. I laughed. I let go of her as my lips kept releasing laughter, which caused tears to form in my eyes. My laughter couldn't stop. I found Sheila staring intently at me in confusion, wondering what I found so funny. In a terrifying manner, I gripped her, slamming her against the wall. My death grip was firm on her shoulders. Sheila tried to escape my grip, but it was next to impossible. Her eyes snapped back at me in a rage. "Let me go." My eyes grew darker, and rage pumped through every vein in mine. "Do you really think I would allow you to reject me, Sheila? Me? The Alpha? Do you really think LD let you escape from me that easily when you have literally turned my world upside down? I can't seem to concentrate on anything else other than you. Your entire existence in my life has haunted me. And you think I'll let go of you that easily? Never." I whispered harshly into her ears. Sheila whimpered under my scorching breath. Hungrily, my hands cupped her face. I possessed her lips, kissing them harshly. My hands released her face and found their way to her. I grabbed them tightly, digging them deeper into me just so she could feel my erection. So she would know how much control her body had over me. How much she affected me. I could smell her sweet arousal, her body getting hotter and responding to mine. I left the assault on her lips and moved to my treasured spot on her neck. I began to suck on her marking spot. A breathless ER0TIC gasp left my mate's lips, and oh goddess, I felt my member harden more against her wet core. It took every control I had to pull away from her. My dark amber eyes stared at her for a few short seconds while only our heavy breathing was heard within her corner wall chamber. I released my grip on her and backed away, heading to the door. "Like it or not, Sheila, you are mine and will continue to be mine as long as I am alive. I won't let you off so easily. We've been destined to be together, whether it be love or hate. I will never let you go. I swear to the goddess," I told her, enunciating each word as she watched me with tears in her eyes. Sparing one last glance at her, I left her chamber. Sheila's point of view. I was on my way to Valerie's spell room when I noticed Killian in the castle hallways. He was with his lover, Thea. She was all over him, sucking his face, and shamelessly, he was kissing her back. Upon hearing my footsteps or sensing my presence, Killian pulled away from Thea, swerving his head to his right, and his eyes connected with mine. For a split second, I froze, hearing the loud drumming of my heart in my ears. My wolf, 80, released a painful howl. I also felt my heart shatter at the sight. But I had made a resolve to myself that as long as I was the Luna of the pack, I would never allow myself to be hurt by Killian and his lover. I broke from his gaze. Without uttering a word, I walked straight past Killian and his lover, moving out the doors into the chilling evening air. The last few days have been monotonous for me. I realized I was hurting more even after knowing the whole truth about Killian and the pack. Sincerely, I felt completely out of place and useless to Killian and the pack. It pained me so much that I could do nothing to help with the curse. Everyone has been treating me well nonetheless, and I have managed to form bonds with the pack members. I frequented the pack house more, having my meals there instead of at the castle. The other day, I watched the female warriors train in the field. I can't deny they were quite good. And I have improved well under Killian's strict training. I spend the early mornings before dawn training with Killian, and the afternoon in his office as well. I have learned a lot more about the pack and its affairs. In the coming week, Killian and I will be attending a meeting at the Diamond Pack outside the capital. It will be my first meeting as the Luna of the pack, and I'm really excited. So am I heard Adie's voice in the back of my mind. I am able to have conversations with my wolf, Adie. All thanks to Valerie. I have been spending most of my evenings in her spell room. We've gotten quite close as she has been helping me with my wolf situation. I can communicate with Adie, but I haven't been able to shift yet. She asked me if I had ever shifted into my wolf in the past. I told her that was impossible. Even though I barely remembered my earlier childhood days, I was certain I couldn't have shifted at such an early age. I was in the witch's spell room, helping Valerie and the witches in whatever way I could for tonight's ritual to find the phoenix stone the council had spoken about. It was twilight already, so we left the spell room and headed for the witch's quarters instead. The ritual will be taking place in the witch's courtyard tonight. For some reason, Valerie insisted I be present. Brielle and I stood at a far distance watching the witches. They haven't begun yet, they were patiently waiting for the moon before commencing. Just like how the moon was the very center of the werewolf's existence, it was also a powerful source of natural magic for the witches. Soon the moon made its presence known, and the witches formed a circle in the court. Each of the coven witches stood beside the burning torches fixed around the courtyard. They were all dressed in similar woolen red cloaks, all wearing hoods over their heads. Some markings were scribbled on the ground. Valerie explained that it was some kind of access to the earth's magic. The witches had their hands coiled together. Valerie was in the center of the circle, also wearing a similar red cloak. She had a wooden kylix in front of her and a small dagger in her hand. It looked pretty normal, but I was told it was an athame dagger used for rituals. She pierced her palm with the dagger, and in a rush, her blood flowed out, dropping into the wooden kylix. When she was done, she gave the dagger to the witch, Gwen. She also pierced her palm, her blood dripping into the same kylix. I watched as everyone within the large circle used the athame dagger, pouring a drop of their blood into the kylix to ensure their magical energy was linked as one for tonight's ritual. Gwen passed the wooden kylix to Valerie, and it was placed on the ground. They started low chants in an unknown language. That sounded more like the ancient Czech language, but it wasn't exactly it. As their chants grew louder, the blazing torches burned fiercer. I felt the hairs on my skin stand up in alert as I felt a presence behind me. I didn't need to move my head to realize who that was, my body always seemed to recognize him. "Is there any progress yet?" Killian asked. I turned to my side, my eyes dwelling on his godlike body. His piercing stare met mine. I shook my head, moving my gaze from him to the witches who were still at work. No. They just started, I said, feeling his heavy stare on me. I folded my hands around my chest, watching as Valerie brought out a small white orb, and as they kept chanting, the orb kept glowing. It was as if I was lost in whatever the witches were doing. I really didn't notice when Killian moved closer. I turned my gaze to him, sensing a disturbing shift in the air. His amber eyes were foggy, he was being mind-linked. His eyes kept growing deadly. I waited for him to be done, and his amber eyes met mine. "Stay here," he ordered. "Why? What's happening?" Elle asked in a rush. His gaze grew intense. "The pack is under another attack." He rushed on. "It's the Dark Circle. They are here for the stone." Sheila's point of view, the pack is under another attack. Killian was quick to speak, his eyes holding a cautious fear. "It's the Dark Circle. They are here for the stone." "The stone?" I repeated, my eyes traveling to the witches. I didn't know every detail of it, but I'm aware the Dark Circle is desperate to have the Phoenix Stone. They want all four for some reason, and so far they only have two. Killian's tingling touch on my skin pulled my attention to him. "Stay here with the witches, Sheila. I will send some warriors here." Subconsciously, I nodded, watching Killian leave with Betrayal. I moved closer to the witch's courtyard. I had to warn them that the pack had already been invaded by the Dark Circle army and they were after the stone. Their chants had already reached the sky, and the flames around them blazed deadlier. Valerie held the white orb in her palm. At every chant she muttered, the orb glowed a blinding shade of white light, its brilliant light swallowing Valerie's deep purple eyes. She stared intensely into the orb like she was seeing something in it. The flames burned profusely, the witches were chanting at the top of their voices, and Valerie's gaze grew more intense. I felt the strong energy that danced around me. It was overwhelming to the point that it caused something within me to stir. The flames around us reached the skies, accompanied by the witches' chants, and then everything died. The burning flames on the torches died, the witch stopped chanting, and the blinding white glow in Valerie's eyes was no more, but the white orb still glowed fiercely. Valerie was smiling, seeming as though she had knowledge of where the stone was in the pack. Quickly, I hastened to her side. "The pack is under attack by the Dark Circle army, and they are here for the stone," I informed her as quickly as I could. Valerie's brows shot up, her face went pale instantly. There was a frown on her features. She glanced around at the witches who were drawing closer. Gwen motioned to Valerie. Valerie parted her lips to speak, but before she could, unknown figures appeared, stalking the roofs of the witches' quarters, wearing black outfits that covered half of their faces. The witches around Valerie took a uniform stance. Before anyone could do anything, more unknown figures rushed into the courtyard surrounding everyone. Everything happened incredibly fast. Valerie and the witches' coven attacked, and so did the unknown figures. They were witches as well. There was a blast in the courtyard that sent everyone flying. My body collided harshly against the cold, heartless ground. I groaned at the harsh impact and the pain that washed through me. As I pulled myself up, the whole atmosphere within the courtyard was hazy. Everyone was covered in a mist. I felt tight hands grip my shoulder. I turned to find Valerie's affrighted face. Head to the witch cemetery now. She shoved the glowing white orb into my hands. Retrieve the stone, the dark circle mustn't get their hands on it. Valerie's eyes snapped to her left, her fingers dancing in the air as she aimed for 3 dark circle witches that lunged at us. With a snap of her fingers, their hearts jumped from their chests, making a sound against the earth. Her deeply worried gaze met mine, and without being told twice, I was up on my feet. My legs were a little shaky from the harsh fall, but I kicked it into motion, navigating my way through the mist that blinded everyone. I was out of the witch's quarters, but I could hear the loud growls that echoed around me. Those dark witches didn't come alone, they were at the packhouse and castle. I raced in the opposite direction, clutching the orb in my hand. Frankly, I didn't know where the witch cemetery was. Ria told me about it, along with the wolf cemetery where we buried the young wolves, but I haven't been to the witch cemetery. I kept running when suddenly I was surrounded by 4 dark circle minions. Their eyes narrowed on the white orb in my hands. Using their non-human speed, they lunged at me. I ducked, slipping my hand underneath my dress to my ankle boots, where my dagger was. I gripped it firmly, diving it into the heart of one of my attackers. I watched with a smile as his face was drained of life and his body desiccated. He collapsed to the ground. I took a quarter-second to send a grateful thanks to Killian. He was the one that gifted me the dagger. I was told it had been magically enhanced by the witch's magic to ensure it was poisonous and effective. This was my first time testing it, and it was simply wonderful. I smiled deeper, but my smile didn't last long as another attack lunged my way. I swung my legs against one of my attackers. Before I could retract my legs, they were gripped by one of these god-forsaken things, and I was tossed hard against the ground. I bit my lip to prevent the groan from escaping, but my hand never abandoned the white orb that kept glowing. I threw my dagger sharply, and it aimed perfectly at his chest. He soon turned pale and dropped dead on the ground. The remaining 2 came at me again. I was up on my feet, pulling my dagger from the dead man's chest. They were almost on top of me. Before I could attack, their hearts jumped from their chests. My eyes stared in horror at the new cavity in their chests. I turned around and saw Gwen. She tossed away the organs of those men that were in her hands. At once, their bodies kissed the dust on the earth. "Thank goodness it's you," I told her. "I have no idea where the witch cemetery is." "It's this way," she led the way, and I followed suit with the orb in my hand. From afar, I could see the faint outline of the cemetery coming into view. We were still a far distance apart when she choked on her breathing, unable to gasp for air. She fell to the ground, gasping. I was by her side in a hurry and, as quickly, we were surrounded by a few witches and wolves. Rogues. Without a doubt, the Dark Circle army. "Run!" She looked me in the eyes, and I nodded. I clutched my dagger even tighter, sprinting straight for the cemetery, some wolves trailing behind me. Suddenly, the earth around us shook mildly, and it was as if a charging current of electricity passed through me. It brought me to a halt, and when I turned around, I saw Gwen bending against the ground, her hands dug into the ground, and her eyes glowed brightly. Immediately, there was a strong force that sent everyone flying. I heard the loud sounds of neck snappings with blood flowing on the earth. It was the first time I had to witness a channeler at work. A witch gifted specifically with the ability to steal magic from anything that has an atom of magical energy in it. She must have absorbed magic from the earth and everything within. Gwen's eyes became normal, and she looked my way, urging me to keep on moving as more of the army of the Dark Circle approached her. I continued running to the witch cemetery without looking back. I reached the cemetery with the glowing white orb in my hands. Gwen said it would help me find the stone. I kept walking through the tombstones, but nothing was happening. It was frustrating as I felt my heartbeat pounding in an unusual manner. I moved past a white pillar, and the orb glowed brighter. I stopped in my tracks, and it glowed brighter in front of the tall pillar stone. There was a symbol on it. I trailed my fingers on it, and it stopped on the pentagon symbol on the pillar. It glowed goldenly, there was a creaking noise. I turned around to find a small opening behind me. And then I saw it. A blue stone. My legs moved with haste, and I grabbed it from its spot. The white orb glowed brighter. This was the powerful Phoenix Stone. But it looked like any ordinary stone. I didn't have time to ponder further on the stone, as I heard threatening growls echoing around the cemetery. My beating heart spiked twice its normal rate. I turned to leave the cemetery, but I was surrounded. All wolves. Some were in their full wolf forms, while others were in their human forms, having beastly claws and sharp canines extending from their lips. I took careful steps backward as they circled me, eyes vicious, and their aura screamed a threatening danger that frightened me. Sheila's point of view, my eyes narrowed around them carefully, as they regarded me with murderous intent. I held onto my dagger tightly, taking a few steps backwards. On my sudden movement, they lunged at me. I ducked around the pillar, moving through the tombstones, hoping to get to the entrance, but I was blocked by a wolf. Its sharp claws were aimed at me. I pulled away from its path, turning backward when I was ambushed by another wolf. Its sharp claws slashed through my arm. The white orb in my hand fell to the ground, shattering at its sound against the ground. My hold on the Phoenix Stone in my other hand tightened. I could feel my blood rush freely from my arm. I mumbled curses under my breath. I wished I could shift into my wolf. It would have been much better. I felt the pain eat away at my bones as I tried to flee, but there was nowhere to go, nor an exit to run to. These rogues had me surrounded. I was at the center of the cemetery, with the rogues circling me. Oh, my goddess, I was done for. This was suicide. I was not only outnumbered, I was outmatched. There was no way I could possibly be, even in my wildest fantasy, victorious against them. They lunged at me, and I held on to my dagger like I was clinging on to my life. I threw it at the first wolf came in contact with, aiming for its heart. I tried moving fast, aiming for the wolf nearest to me. I turned around, but before I could send my dagger into one of the wolves, I felt a sharp pain in my back. Elle yelped in pain at the tearing of my skin. I managed to dagger the beast beside me. When another plunged its claws into my side, the painful impact caused me to collapse on my knees. With the little strength I still had in my grip, I sent my dagger into the wolf closest to me. From nowhere, sharp claws tore through my stomach. I screamed at the pain. Another claw came at me. I could feel its sharpness in my chest. Ruthless pain pierced through my bones. Then, as quickly as I was gripped, I could feel my legs wiggle in the air as I was tossed harshly against the wall. The stone was snatched away from me. My whole body began to tremble uncontrollably, but never once did I let go of the phoenix stone. At full speed, the wolves cornered me. Piercing claws wrapped around my neck, tightening. I felt the warm crimson fluid that rushed down my neck as one of the wolves suffocated me. The trembling within my bones intensified. The pain around my body began to vanish. I felt nothing as my body trembled all the more. Something was wrong with me. I could feel it from the depth of my soul. I felt different. It was like there was a new gush of energy beating from the cave of my heart, breaking free, spreading from my chest to every part of my body. My stomach became hot. It burned with an intense flame. It was uncomfortable, as it burned with purpose. It's the only pain I felt at the moment. It tortured me like it was furious, and craved freedom. A kind of freedom that has been denied all along. I felt this kind of pain when Killian went on a rampage, and he almost killed me. The pain from my stomach, again, traveled its way to my chest, leaving a burning sensation that killed my insides but at the same time breathed a new kind of life within me. A new kind of energy. Its intense flames moved from my chest to my throat, and that's when I felt it. The choking urge to scream. My blue eyes jerked open, and my irises burned like they were in flames. Whatever was wrong with me caused the wolves to swerve their attention towards me. Their gaze broke in fear just staring at me. The stone that was held in one of the rogue hands began to glow a blinding shade of blue. There was a distant yet familiar aura of magic that circled around the cemetery. Without prior warning, the burning sensation in my throat pushed out of my lips, making me scream loudly, and I succumbed to darkness. Killian's point of view, these fudging as SH-0 sent by the Dark Circle had infiltrated the whole pack. They were in the pack house already, and also at the castle. The pack army had scattered around, fighting against the rogues and witches the Dark Circle had sent to retrieve the stone. I was at the pack house fighting, along with Morgan, while Mason and Alan covered the castle. The pack's female beta, Brielle, Adam, and Xavier were scattered around with many warriors. The more we killed, the more reinforcement came for them. It was maddening. We had anticipated this attack, but not at the same time that the witches were preoccupied with the ritual to find the stone. I gripped one of the rogues' necks, detaching it from its body with my claws. I was not in my complete wolf form. In my human form, Riker and I were sharing control. With my speed, I was before another rogue, plucking his heart from his chest. I moved on to others, and the earth welcomed their roguish hearts within seconds. I moved on to the next thing when Jax's mind linked me. I had sent him, along with Nate and Caleb, to the witch's quarters to protect Sheila. What Jax? Luna isn't at the witch's quarters. His sudden words through the mind link caused me to become still. The witch's quarters are also under attack by the Dark Circle witches, Jax rushed. I felt the life within me drain. Where is Sheila? Find her. Riker and I growled in unison. We are on our way to the witch cemetery. My brows were paralyzed. What are you going there for? Find your Luna at once. I growled again in a rage. She's there right now. She went to find the stone, and Jax stopped talking. Jax, Alpha, they are everywhere. His voice held fear. I disconnected from him, heading out of the pack house. What happened? Morgan mind-linked me. He was at a distance, fighting against these rogues. Stay here. I have to get to Sheila. She's in danger, I said, rushing through the mind link. Without sparing a second, I shifted into my gargantuan black wolf and I sprinted off to the witch's cemetery. I took the shortcut through the woods, feeling a presence behind me. I turned to find Morgan's brown wolf racing behind me. What, Morgan? I told you to remain at the pack house. I yelled in fury through the mind link. Tell me when you could ever order me around. He shot back through the mind link, furious. Very furious. I couldn't tell exactly why. I could care less about that right now. My priority was getting to Sheila. Protecting her. Riker and I couldn't even quell the rage breathing fire into our bones nor the fear that clawed at our chest. Sheila, please be safe. I whispered to myself. Morgan and I approached the witch's cemetery, and the sight before me made my insides shrink. Everywhere was choked with the Dark Circle army. Most of them were roguish wolves. My gaze narrowed in on Gwen, Caleb, and Nate. They were all fighting against the rogues at a far distance. But no sight of Sheila. Morgan joined in on the fight. I raced to the entrance of the cemetery where Jax was fighting against rogues. Where is Sheila? Inside, Jax sounded through the mind link. I froze. Many rogues were blocking the entrance, and there seemed to be a whole lot of them inside the cemetery with my mate. My heart began to race in fear for Sheila. For a broken second, I felt like I could not breathe as the thought of Sheila alone came to me. That fear and pain turned into rage. And I lost it. I let out a loud growl that echoed into the darkness. My inner vision turned red, and I went on a killing spree, trying to make my way into the cemetery. From my peripheral vision, I saw Morgan join us. He killed angrily, as vicious as I did. Finally, we made our way into the cemetery, fighting off the rogues that were scattered around it. Riker and I scanned around, searching for Sheila. It was hard to pinpoint her scent since it was everywhere. Riker drew closer to a blood trail, and to my horror, it was Sheila's. I moved with speed, charging at any rogue I came in contact with, following the trail of Sheila's blood as it led me deeper into the cemetery. From afar, I noticed wolves circling around a pillar. My blood went cold. I couldn't see what was happening, but there was a frightening stir within me at the thought that it could be Sheila. I leapt in the air, racing closer when a piercing scream echoed around us. It was loud and deafening, birthing a blinding blue light that covered the earth's darkness. The deafening scream caused the earth to tremble. The calm air around us grew furious and wild. Its loud screams echoed through the air, and it carried an overwhelming surge of magic that could force anyone down to their knees. I couldn't see through the blinding blue light that formed a fog around us. The magical energy around me forced me to shift from my wolf to my human form. I collapsed to my knees as the intensity shook the core of my bones. Every wolf in the pack could feel it as several howls rose to the sky. All I could think about was my mate. Then, at once, the scream halted, and the blinding light vanished from the darkness. What I saw all around me made my eyes widen in horror. What? Killian's point of view, the piercing scream caused the earth beneath me to rumble, and a blinding blue light covered the darkness, impeding the moon from witnessing anything. Elle couldn't see a thing. The earth around me was doused with an unfamiliar energy. It was so powerful that it forced me to shift from my wolf form to my human form. The loud screams lasted longer, agitating the calm air as it turned wild, aiming at anything or, better yet, anyone in its path. The earth shook and the blinding light continued as the scream intensified. After many long seconds, the earth's vibration stopped, and blue light vanished from the darkness, giving the moon access to the earth. I scanned around, but there was no sign of my mate, Sheila. Riker was getting anxious. And his anxiousness was making me furious and impatient. I raced to where the wolves had gathered around a pillar. My heart jammed with an unrecognizable fear. To my horror and soon confusion, they were all dead. Every one of those imbeciles were dead. Their blood smeared the grounds of the cemetery. They were in the most horrendous state. This was impossible. Just a few minutes ago they were all breathing as sh0lay, and now they are dead. My heart skipped a fearful bit, searching around the lifeless corpses of the rogues for Sheila. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I was done with my search, and to my relief, Sheila wasn't among the horrid corpses. I was relieved, but my fear was far from gone. I needed to see her safe before I could really feel calm. I searched for Sheila, walking past the tombstones. Her scent kept getting stronger. Finally, it led me to a wall where dead rogues were scattered around. My eyes fell on the phoenix stone. It laid on the ground, glowing bright blue light, and beside it, at the center of this blood bath, was my mate, Sheila. I was hit with sharp pain. Riker howled in pain as well at the sight of Sheila on the cold ground. She was unconscious. The blood streaming from her body made my insides writhe with pain. I swear I completely froze. This can't be. No. Sheila. I felt my breathing hitch. My heartbeat was spiking. I couldn't move an inch, my face paralyzed with shock, my insides crippled from excruciating pain. It can't be. My heart was hammering hard against my chest. I couldn't breathe. It was as if every breath in existence had somehow vanished. I felt like my whole world had shattered. My life was slowly escaping from me. I took a few excruciating steps closer to where my mate lay unmoving on the ground. The blood in my veins ceased to exist. My knees were crippled down to the earth. My trembling hands moved to reach for my mate, covered in her own blood. A broken gasp erupted from my lips as my hand touched Sheila. Her body was still and almost cold. My body began to quiver, my bones trembling hard against my joints. My soul drowned with several emotions all at once, suffocating me. I held her firmly, pulling her body into my arms. My fingers brushed back the locks of her brown hair that covered her face. Another broken sob left my lips in her state. Her neck had been injured badly, with blood rushing from her head. She was bleeding from her stomach, her arm, and her back. I couldn't hold the pain I felt within me. I wanted to release it. My lips flew open and a resounding growl left my lips from the pain I felt. I heard hasty steps rush to where I was with my mate. Morgan and Jax were beside me, their eyes wide in horror as they wandered over the horrendous state of the wolves and then to Sheila. "They are just like the others," Jax muttered more to himself, grabbing the stone from the mess on the earth. Morgan's hand fell on Sheila's neck, inspecting her slow pulse. Even her heartbeat was slow. What happened to her? Morgan's words were low and breathless. I could see the features of his face crumpled with pain. Any other time, his affection for my mate would have angered me, but I didn't have the time for that right now. Sheila needed to be seen by the pack's healers. I don't know. She was like this when I found her. Those things. Morgan bit out in a rage. Without saying any more, I scooped my mate into my arms, standing on my feet. I hurried out of the cemetery, finding Gwen, Nate, and Caleb in the middle of another bloodbath of dead rogues. The rogues' army that was fighting just some minutes ago was dead on the ground in a similar horrendous state as the ones in the cemetery. This was awfully strange. Everyone from the Dark Circle was no longer alive. It was almost as if something aimed at them all. What happened to her? Gwen was the first to speak. She's bleeding profusely. Can you stop it? I asked her quickly. Gwen moved closer to Sheila's unconscious body in my arms. Her hands were up in the air, falling on the wound on Sheila's stomach. Gwen muttered a few words before opening her eyes. Elle used a lot of my magic fighting. I can't stop her bleeding. She is in a lot of pain. Gwen's words punctured my heart further. Do something, please. She held Sheila's hand and, without saying a word, she closed her eyes and opened them again. Elle absorbed some of her pain. She really needs to see the healers, Gwen said. Everyone's eyes held fear and worry, seeing Sheila in such a horrible state. It scared me deeply. I dashed to the castle as quickly as I could, and all of the Dark Circle witches and wolves who had attacked there were dead, just like the ones in the cemetery. Alan and Mason rushed to my side as they noticed me approaching with a wounded Sheila in my arms. I couldn't reply to any of their insane questions at the moment. My utmost priority was saving my mate. I made my way to Sheila's chamber and, carefully, Elle placed her on the bed. My body is now covered in her blood. Rhiannon burst through the door, her eyes widening as she saw Sheila in that state, and she was soon by her side, sobbing profusely. I mind-linked the pack's healers at once to come to see Sheila. Just then, Morgan came bustling through the door with Valerie, stalking behind. My emotions were all over the place, and I couldn't hide my rage and vexation. It had blinded me already, and I couldn't stop myself. Come on, Valerie. Why on earth did you allow her to do something so dangerous? I charged angrily at Valerie, but Morgan was quick to grab me before I could successfully reach her, pushing me against the wall. He was very strong, but his strength couldn't wrestle against mine. I was stronger. I pushed myself out of his grasp. This was all Valerie's fault. She knew Sheila wasn't like us. She didn't have her wolf and couldn't even defend herself properly, yet she sent her to retrieve the stone. What was she thinking? Not once did Valerie spare me a glance, her focus was on my mate, Sheila. Speedily, Valerie hurried to Sheila's side, her hands inspecting her carefully at the places she was bleeding profusely from. In a few seconds, she began muttering chants while her fingers danced skillfully over Sheila's wounds. The door was pushed open, and Gwen rushed in, accompanied by another witch. Behind them were the pack healers. "Everyone, please give us the room. We need to tend to her at once." Valerie turned to Morgan, Alan, Rhiannon, and me, indicating we left. "Well, that's no." I sent her a fierce look. "Like I would. I am not leaving her side in that state of hers. Please, Alpha. There's no time to argue. She is badly wounded and needs urgent treatment. We can't have you all here while we undress her," Valerie urged again, her tone pleading. As if I really care. There was no way I was leaving my mate in such a state. I charged forward at her, but Morgan gripped me again. "Enough, brother. Rage won't do us any good. This is Sheila's life on the line. Let the witches and healers do their work," he spoke quietly. My eyes fell into his emerald green depths, which showed nothing but pain as well. I couldn't hold back the tears that escaped my eyes. I nodded. Reluctantly, I left the chamber with everyone, leaving just the witches and healers to tend to my mate. I rubbed my palm against the back of my neck, leaning on the wall. "You have to pull through. Please, mate." Killian's point of view. "Gosh. These hours have been the longest hours of my life. I have been waiting outside Sheila's chamber for only the goddess knows how long." My wolf was pacing around, panicking. He was agitated. He wanted to see our mate, to see her awake and out of pain. To have those beautiful eyes of hers stare back at me. I groaned in frustration. Grabbing a handful of my hair in my hands, I felt like dying, knowing something bad could happen to her. She shouldn't have to go through any of this. I wish I could save her from the pain she was going through. I felt rage and impatience mixing with the frustration entrenched in my bones. But I had to be calm. I couldn't afford to lose control. Sheila needed me to be sane when she awakes. I took a deep and calm breath, hearing Morgan's voice through the mind link. The warriors had cleaned up the disgusting remnants of the Dark Circle army within the pack. Even the witches also helped in fixing the damage around the pack, tending to the injured warriors along with the healers. But I couldn't concentrate on the pack now, not when my mate was in such a terrible state. My head snapped up at the sound of the door to Sheila's chamber opening. I was on my feet when the pack's healer, Maggie, stepped out with her assistants. One after the other, they lowered their heads and rushed past me. Maggie approached me, lowering her head in respect. "How is she doing?" I asked, noting the fear that was rising in my tone. Maggie heaved a sigh and pursed her lips. "She was badly injured everywhere. The wounds are very deep. Frankly, I am surprised that she's able to survive, more so, being without her wolf." Maggie paused, inhaling. "We managed to stop the bleeding, and the witches were able to heal her wounds, but... That didn't sound good." I held my breath tightly, awaiting whatever her words were. "But what, Maggie?" I asked sternly, folding my hands against my chest. "Right now, she's still unconscious. So, we still have to monitor her until she awakes. It's been hours since I gave her the medicinal herbs. She should have already responded to it, but I don't understand why she is not regaining consciousness. She spoke quietly, staring at me. I don't understand, I muttered as I went past her and entered Sheila's chamber. Valerie and Gwen were beside her. When I moved closer to the bed, they stepped back. Sheila's pristine body was on the bed. She was tucked perfectly well under the sheets. She was still not awake. I moved closer to her, my heart tearing up at the sight of her pale face, and her breathing was awfully slow like she was in a deep slumber. "Sheila, please wake up," I said, taking hold of her hand in my giant one. Her skin was cold, but it wasn't from the winter's cold air. I rubbed my hand gently against hers, trying to provide whatever warmth I could. I felt guilty. I didn't realize that tears had slipped down my eyes. I felt a hand on my shoulder. I tilted my head a little to find Valerie's somber eyes on me. "Why isn't she waking up yet?" I asked her, my voice battered and confused. Even without her wolf to aid her fast healing, the witches and healers had managed to stop the bleeding and heal her injuries. So why wasn't she awake yet? "We have to be patient and hopeful. She might regain her consciousness soon," Valerie said, trying to assure me. "But I have known this witch for the longest, and her eyes can never fool me." She wasn't even convinced by her own words. I nodded gently. "What happened last night?" I asked her. Nothing still made sense to me. Sheila's screams, and the powerful energy that shook every one of us. I turned to Valerie. Was the Phoenix Stone responsible for it? Her eyes on me were intense. "I don't know," was all she said. But it was as though her eyes were not saying a lot more. "Stay with her, your presence as her mate will help her a lot," she said before leaving the room. Leaving me with an unconscious Sheila. I stayed unmoving from her side throughout the day and never drifted my eyes away from her unconscious figure throughout the night, but Sheila's condition still hadn't improved one bit. Her body was cold, her heartbeat was slower, and her breathing was the same. I was sitting on the bed beside my mate when Valerie came in with Gwen and a few witches. They all lowered their heads toward me. "She still hasn't woken up. Something is wrong," I said. "I know." Valerie came closer. I was desperately hoping she would wake up before dawn. But seeing her state remains the same, means it's exactly what I feared. Valerie muttered. I pulled up from the bed, interested in what she had to say. "What do you mean?" She looked at Sheila and walked toward the bed. Her hands fell on Sheila's forehead, and she closed her eyes. Her lips moved, whispering a few chants. Then Valerie opened her eyes. Her eyes were glowing a bright purple. She kept on muttering chants until she was done. Her eyes lost their glow and it became normal. Valerie jerked her hand away from Sheila's forehead. "The reason she isn't waking up is that she's trapped somewhere in her mind," she shocked me. Sheila was trapped in her mind. I sent a glance at Sheila, then my eyes came back to Valerie. "How is that even possible?" I questioned. "It is very much possible. It must be from whatever happened at the cemetery," Valerie uttered. "So, it could be because of the power of the stone?" I queried. "I don't think so," Valerie said. "The stone had nothing to do with this. I think it's all her." Her words were confusing. I had a lot of questions, but none of that mattered now. What do we do now, Valerie? I began pacing, unable to stay still. She is stuck in her mind right now. You could have easily been able to pull her out if you had marked her. But since you didn't mark her, it'll be far more difficult to pull her out. Still, your help will be needed in waking her up. Valerie's lips kept moving, her words sinking into my ears. And how am I going to do that? I went back to bed. The witches and I will aid with the spell. At her words, Gwen and the witches moved closer. There was a knock at the door, and without being asked, Morgan walked in. Valerie continued. Our magic will break the barrier of her mind. Using the mate bond, you will be able to access her mind. You will have to search through her mind to find her. Once you have found her, ask her to follow your voice, and the witches and I will do the rest. We will be able to pull her out. I nodded, listening to Valerie. What is going on here? Morgan's voice rang and Valerie calmly explained it to him. After that, she explained to me everything that I needed to do. I took my seat beside my mate as Gwen and the witches positioned themselves around the bed with their hands linked together, forming a chain. Morgan retreated to the door. Are you ready? Valerie was in front of me. Her eyes scanned me over. I couldn't hide the fear in my gut at the thought of what would happen if Sheila still didn't wake up after this. This was our last resort. This will work, right? I questioned her, my amber pair regarding her, firmly. Valerie nodded. It will. She sounded absolutely sure, and her words made me sigh. Okay, I am ready, I told her. Riker ambled to the front of my mind, ready as well. You have to touch her forehead, Valerie urged. I did as Valerie instructed, pulling my hand on Sheila's forehead while the other held her hand. Valerie placed her palm on my face, her purple eyes peering into the depths of my eyes, sending warmth to my chest. Gwen and the witches began chanting, and soon Valerie joined them. I heard the low echoes of the witches rise beyond a whisper. Their chants echoed in the walls of my soul. My breathing became slow, and my heartbeat lowered. I could hear the faint drumming of my heart. I started to feel my eyelashes grow heavy and tired. A burning sensation spreads around my body, starting from my chest to every bone in my body. The witch's chants began to echo within the walls of my mind. I felt myself being pulled away into obscure darkness. Valerie's point of view as the witch started chanting, I gripped firmly onto Killian's head while he had his hand on Sheila's forehead. My eyes pierced right into the soul of his eyes as I began chanting along with the witches. We were performing a spell that would give Killian access to Sheila's subconscious. It's been a day now since she's been unconscious and still hasn't woken up. We have tried our very best to ensure her condition remained stable. Her wounds had already been healed. It didn't take long to realize that her unconscious state wasn't from the physical injuries she sustained. This was deeper than that. Whatever had happened in the cemetery must have affected her in some way. This wasn't from the power of the stone, I could feel it. It was from another source, a stronger source, which happened to be her. What I felt the night she retrieved the stone could not be mistaken. Every one of the wolves, and even the witches, felt the enormous magical energy that pierced through the whole pack. It was foreign, yet so powerful. I felt the same magic the night Killian lost control of his demon and went on a rampage. When we arrived at the meadow, Sheila was right there with Killian, and to my surprise, Killian had regained control of his soul. Something did happen that night, and now more than ever, I do believe it had something to do with her. That's when I started to have doubts about her. From the first day I met her at Luna's coronation, I realized she carried a strong aura, but I felt it was because she was mated to an alpha, and the first time she stepped foot into my spell room, the door opened for her. That wasn't supposed to happen. It only opens for anyone with magic in their blood, but yet, it opened for her. That's more confusing when every piece of her screams she's a wolf. There's something about her that is a mystery to me. And I need to find out exactly what it is. My eyes pulled open, glowing brightly. Killian had successfully slipped into her mind. Now all I can do is wait and hope he's able to find her. Sheila's point of view, it was pitch black. I was completely surrounded by darkness. I felt extremely cold. I have been walking in this darkness for what seems like forever. It feels like an endless tunnel. My heartbeat was spiking up as I kept walking. A certain fear crippled my insides. The more I kept walking, the more the air around me turned graver. Suddenly, without warning, light surrounded me and I began to fall. Around me were images from my memories, floating past me as I kept on walking. As I walked further, it was as if I was walking backward in time to the place I had detested for the longest time, my very own home, the Silver Mist Pack. I saw memories with my father that I wished I could forget, moments I regretted, and they made me hate my father all the more. I saw my father and then the ruthless way he treated me. Growing up in the Silver Mist Pack was more than difficult, it was unbearable. Being hated by my own father was the worst torture of my life. I had no idea why he had so much hate for me. Like my very existence was appalling to him. It was almost as if he wanted me gone, yet at the same time needed me. I was constantly locked up in my room like a child that wasn't wanted and needed to be hidden away. I kept on walking in the darkness, but the images around me disappeared. I couldn't see anything around me from the time before I was 9. Those were memories I couldn't remember. I always found it strange that I couldn't remember anything before then, but whenever I asked anything, I was severely punished by my father. As I kept moving, I noticed a small light in the distance. It was glowing a bright blue. A rush of relief flooded my entire being. My lips broke into a smile for the first time since I had been down here. Hopefully, it'll be a way out of this darkness. At this point, all I wanted was to be out of the darkness. I hated it badly. Even in this horrible state of mind, all I could think about was Killian, and how badly I craved his presence. Despite knowing that I was not the one in his heart, I still craved his warmth. As I walked into the light, the cold around me quickly changed to a soothing warmth. Everywhere was bright. I looked around and realized I was surrounded by several crystals that had a faint glow of blue. Every one I peered into held my reflection. I tried to find a way out of here, but the crystals had formed a wall around me. Fear and panic rose within me when each crystal began to crack around me, and in an instant, loud shattering sounds echoed as the crystals crashed against the ground. The loud sound pierced into my soul, affecting me. I collapsed to the ground and my eyes burned brightly as I was pulled away by a force, and my surroundings changed. Everything around me was blurry. I couldn't see clearly, but I found my 9-year-old self running through the woods to a pack house. It wasn't the Silver Mist pack, the environment was unfamiliar to me. I saw a woman approach me along with 2 older boys. I moved closer to them, but I could only see the blurry outline of their figures. When my younger self called her mom, my whole body became stiff. Was this woman really my mother? Immediately, my surroundings became dark. The loud sound lingered around me. I pulled my eyes open and my face went pale at the sight before me, or better yet, the person before me. My gaze pierced right through that of a young girl. She was at a distance. Her eyes were a brilliant blue, and her lips were open, letting out a heartbreaking scream. Tears rushed down her cheeks. She was in pain. And I felt it. Her body was covered with blood, but it wasn't hers. It belonged to the woman laying lifeless in her small arms. I walked closer to where she was. It took me less than a second to realize that that girl was me. My eyes welled in tears. That was me, but I'm not sure what day it was or who that woman was. There was a banging pain in my heart, like I was supposed to remember that woman. Like remembering her meant a lot to me. Suddenly, the surroundings began to come alive. There was chaos around us. People were dying, wolves fighting in their various forms. Pain and death took dominance, and it made my heart ache all the more. The loud screams from my 9-year-old self became louder. It caused the air around her to turn wild, swallowing everything in its path. The earth shook violently, tearing up. The night sky turned red, allowing red water to pour from it. As it soaked me, I realized it was blood, and my younger self was quickly surrounded by a vicious-looking beast. My heart thundered. I wanted to run to her, but the wild tornado swallowed everything around me, returning me to darkness. All that echoed around me was the sound of people dying, and wolves howling. I felt pain writhing through my bones. I needed this pain to end. I needed to escape from this place. I couldn't stand the pain that killed me. Just then, I felt something. A presence. Sheila. I heard in a whisper. It was almost inaudible, but it was calm and soothing. I turned around, but I couldn't see anything in the midst of the darkness. Sheila, said the voice once more. I could recognize it now as it echoed in the darkness. Killian. My tear-filled voice echoed in the darkness. I didn't hear the voice again, and for a frightful second, I thought it had abandoned me. Quickly, a warmth surrounded me. You have to get out, Sheila. You are stuck in your mind, and you don't belong there. I can't. I've tried, but I just can't seem to escape this place, I cried more. The warmth drew closer, settling inside of me. Come with me, he said. I'll help you come out. You just have to focus on my voice, please, Killian, don't leave me. I won't ever leave you. I promise with my life. He whispered, his words calming me, and just like he said, I followed the sound of his voice. It started to echo, and my surroundings grew hazy, allowing a distinct light to float in. And I felt myself escaping. Third-person point of view. Killian huffed out some air. He looked around to find himself back in Sheila's chamber. Did it work? Morgan drew closer to the bed. As his eyes fell on Sheila's unconscious state, Killian felt her body, and it was not as cold as it was minutes ago. She was breathing normally now, and her heartbeat pounded against her chest at a normal speed. A smile found his lips. She was back but still sleeping. Killian nodded. One by one, the witches left Sheila's chamber, leaving just him, Morgan, and Valerie. She will soon be awake, Valerie's voice sounded, as she moved to the door. Killian smiled. Thank you. Soon she left with Morgan, and Killian was alone with his mate. He couldn't leave her side yet, not until she wakes up. He stirred on the bed, feeling movements beneath him. Killian opened his eyes. He didn't know when he fell asleep or how long he had been out. The sudden darkness around him did well to inform him that it was twilight already. Killian heard a light groan. His amber pair fell on Sheila's body, which was imprisoned in his arms. Her eyes pushed open lazily and fell on him. Killian couldn't stop his smile from appearing on his lips. His fingers tucked back the strands of her brown hair behind her ears. Finally, you are awake, Killian said huskily. Sheila's blue eyes stared at him unblinkingly before her eyes went around her room, then they met him again. As if just remembering something, she pushed up from the bed. Killian leaned back a little to allow her to sit upright on the bed. The stone, her words were cut short by the groaning that vibrated from her throat. She clutched her stomach immediately. Her action caused him to pull closer to her, placing a hand on her stomach while the other held her cheek. Relax, the witches managed to heal your wounds, but you still need some rest, Killian told her, caressing her cheek softly. Absent-mindedly, she leaned into his touch. What about the stone? She inquired softly. Safe. It's with the council already. The witch sent it to them. Killian leaned closer, his forehead touching hers. For a second, you scared me, Killian confessed. Sheila's eyes stared back at him, shocked. Before she could speak, his lips crashed against her lips, silencing her. Instinctively, she slid a hand to his neck, moaning. A hot sensation gathered in his groin, making him kiss her more deeply. He pushed her thick brown hair back from her face, positioning himself firmly on her. With his fingers, he carefully tugged down the sleeves of her dress, and as eager as he was, they came falling down to her waist. He kept on grinding it against her treasured spot. Without cautious warning, the door pushed open. Sheila and Killian broke apart, their heads turning to the door to find Ria's reddened face on them. Ria lowered her head quickly. I'm sorry, she said, scurrying out of the room. Killian's eyes fell on Sheila. She averted his face, fixing her dress. I'm sorry, she stuttered, looking flushed. No, Killian drawled, a smile teasing his lips. With what you just did, I can tell you are not sorry it happened. Her face turned pink. All right, she said, looking at him. I am not sorry. I think I mean, you should. It's better you leave now. Her stammering amused him, and her awkwardness melted him. Whatever you say, mate, he said as he stepped away from her, a teasing smile on his lips before leaving her chambers. Ria was right in front of the door. She had her head down as Killian passed through. Killian was almost in his chamber when Morgan hastened towards him. His bright emerald green eyes were dark. His face didn't look happy at all. Killian's heart pounded. What on earth could have happened now? Killian jerked from the bed. It was early in the morning, and he had spent the night with Thea. He could barely get any sleep last night. Riker wouldn't let him. Usually, when Killian was around Thea, Riker disappears completely from the conversation, almost as if he likes to go into hiding whenever she's in the picture. But nowadays, it has become worse. Killian grabbed his linen shirt from the rack, gazing out the window, thinking about his mate. Today, she will be attending her first meeting as the Luna of his pack, and he will be accompanying her. The idea made Killian smile, but it soon turned to a frown as he was reminded of the cause of his sleepless nights. The dark circle. Even after the witch's tremendous effort to find the stone and send it over to the council, the dark circle still managed to get the remaining stones. Now they are in possession of all 4 phoenix stones that have tremendous power and are capable of making the impossible become possible. That was the main reason the phoenix stones were kept apart. Its power was out of this world and completely dangerous in the wrong hands, which in this case is the dark circle. They were so desperate to have the phoenix stones, and now that it was in their hands, it scared him of what plans they have for those stones and their power. Whatever it is, it's definitely not good and will put everyone in complete danger. Killian felt Thea's hands around his waist, sliding under his shirt, teasing him, seducing him back into her bed. "I can't stay long," Killian told her, but her assault on his body didn't stop. "And why not?" Her hot breath settled on his skin. "The Diamond Pack meeting, remember? It's today. Sheila and I have to be there," Killian said, in sheer honesty. Her hands on his body stopped moving, and she retracted them immediately, releasing an angry sigh. It forced him to turn to face her. Killian could feel the tension in the air. Her black hair fell straightly around her face, her brown eyes held fury. One that matched the scowl on her face. She was dressed in a short dress that revealed her curves. "Killian, so basically, you are saying you are leaving me to spend time with her." Thea's hands were folded against her chest, as her soft, gentle voice tried to keep the rage evident. Again, she made sure to put pressure on that last word. Riker stirred angrily at her words, but Killian shut him out. "Thea," Killian called, watching her angry face. This was something new to him. Thea wasn't the jealous type. She was sweet and always understanding. "Killian, seriously, I don't want to hear it," she voiced, her eyes welling up with tears. Killian hated it whenever she got hurt because of him. "Ever since that woman came into the picture, you haven't given me much attention. But not once did I complain about anything, or the condescending manner in which she treats me. I tried to be understanding because I know you are the one hurting more in all of this, but now it feels like I'm slowly being discarded. That woman is always beside you." Tears rolled unstoppably from her eyes. It broke him to see her cry. Killian approached her, and wrapped his arms around her, wiping the tears from her cheeks. She was right, and he knew it. He has been spending too much time with Sheila, when in fact, Thea should be the one he spends more time with. He didn't want her to feel like she was slowly being discarded or that he was only with her because she was the only one who could break the curse. That's the truth, human. Riker sounded heartless, clearly pissed. Killian ignored him. Even if that was the truth, Thea didn't deserve to feel this way. I will attend the meeting today with Sheila, and after that, you have my word, I will spend all of my time with you. Killian kissed her lips softly. No, she said, quickly shaking her head. No. Killian asked, crippling my brows. Please, spend the day with me. Someone else can accompany her instead, Thea begged. There was something in her eyes that made him churn. Please, Killian. I rarely ask anything of you, her words made him sigh. That was right. Thea never asked anything of him. Even when he found out she was the gifted one who needed to help us break the curse, she was more than happy to help him. She deserved this. At least for once. Sheila's point of view. Ouch. I cried as Betrayal pulled hard at my corset's ribbons, tucking in my waist and plumping up my bosom. Breathe it in, girl, Betrayal instructed me once more. I sighed, swallowing in some air before tucking in my stomach. Betrayal used the opportunity to place more of her strength on my back and pull the ribbons harder together. I groaned mildly. I think this is a little tight, I complained honestly, feeling like my ribs might give out any second from now. As if I wasn't breathless enough already without the corset. I felt as nervous as I did last night. I didn't expect I would still feel as anxious as I was today. But my angst and nervousness were very much understandable. For the first time, I would be attending a meeting with several allies outside the capital. I first met her as the Luna of our pack at our first meeting. So, yes, it was a big deal to me. Betrayal groaned, loosening off a bit before finally tying it off into a big bow. I turned to Betrayal, the beta female's eyes scrutinizing me carefully. A small smile was let loose on her lips. You look beautiful, Betrayal said with a thoughtful smile. I turned to look at myself in the tall Jinnermau's mirror and I couldn't help but agree with her. I looked so beautiful, yet so alien. My curly brown hair was beautifully styled, allowed to fall neatly onto both sides of my shoulders. My blue eyes were bright and vibrant, complementing my flawless skin. My eyes trailed from the corset on top that flared out like a Cinderella dress at the waist. The dress was stunning, brilliant yellow with pastel white flowers that lined the corset and flowed down. I smiled sweetly to myself, complimenting her also. Thank you, Betrayal, I told her with a soft smile. My message was delivered directly to Betrayal. She was also dressed for the short trip outside the capital, wearing a deep velvet blue dress. There was a rhythmic knock at the door, drawing both Betrayal's and mine attention. Come in, Betrayal shouted. Ria popped her head around the door, her breath catching in her throat when she saw that I was looking so beautiful. Sheila, you look amazing. Ria whispered with a smile. My smile deepened. I really wanted to look my best. Aside from the fact that this was my first meeting as the Pax Luna, this was also my first time appearing in such a formal gathering with my mate, Killian. I had to look insanely beautiful today. Oh, right, Killian completely forgot. Ria moved closer to me and Betrayal. She genuinely seemed to be in a cheerful mood this morning. The horses are ready, and so is everyone, she beamed happily. All right then, let's head out. Brielle led the way while I followed suit, and soon we were outside the castle. Many warriors were also prepared to be accompanying us, including Brielle, Mason, and Killian. On that thought, my eyes scanned around for my mate, but he wasn't in sight yet. Where was he? I moved closer to my horse when Morgan's sharp call sent me gazing at him and his pair of green eyes. Oh goddess, please bless me with a mate like her, he faked, gasping, admiring me with hooded eyes and a smirkish grin. Just shut up, okay? I chuckled. No, Sheila, you look absolutely gorgeous, so don't tell me to stop talking now. When my brother sees you, he would fall head over heels for you, that's for sure. Morgan went on complimenting me, causing me to blush just a little bit. I know you're only exaggerating to put me in a good mood, and I appreciate that, Morgan, I said to him with an earnest smile perched on my lips. He always did know how to make me genuinely smile. I wasn't exaggerating, but, okay. Whatever you say, he chuckled, staring me down. I shifted my gaze past him to the doors, looking for you-know-who. Killian should be out by now. Are you perhaps searching for my brother? Morgan asked, taking the question straight from my mind. Was he some sort of psychic? That would be a perfectly good explanation for why he always seemed to know what was running through my mind. I nodded, as a reply. He should be out soon, any minute from now, Morgan assured me, with his arms crossed. Just on time, Mason strolled over to us with his horse. He lowered his head to me as a form of acknowledgement. We should begin our journey now, to reach the diamond pack soon, Mason said, getting on his horse. And what about Killian? I asked Mason with crippled brows. I began having a bad feeling about this already. He changed his mind, requesting you attend the meeting alone today, Mason said coldly. I felt my insides churn with rage and a little hurt. I didn't need anyone to tell me that Killian would rather stay back with his lover than go with me. I couldn't pry the hurt away from my eyes. Getting on my horse, I sent a final glance to Morgan. And with an apologetic nod from him and a glint of anger in his eyes, I rode behind Mason and the warriors, with Brielle's horse protruding beside me. This was surely going to be a long and agonizing trip. I could just feel it inside. I and the escorts left the pack, riding into the first human village that was closest to the pack's territory. As we continued riding, I gripped the reins of my horse tightly. We've been riding for hours now, without even taking a single rest. I had to put on my furry blue cloak over my dress as the winter's cold air kept lashing against my skin. We had just successfully left the capital's borders. We were riding past the mountains now. The Diamond Pack was deep beyond North Central. In just a few more hours, we will be arriving at their territory. Thankfully, I just wanted this darn meeting to be over. I felt angry and exhausted, not from the long, tiring ride, but in Killian's absence. I couldn't even hide my disappointment. What happened? Why did he suddenly just change his mind? I decided to divert my attention elsewhere, such as to the recurring dreams I'd been having. My dreams were always the same, where I constantly found myself in an unknown surrounding, in the middle of what seemed like a war, with chaos all around me, people dying and the sounds of people screaming all around. And there in my arms laid a woman, dead. They were more like nightmares, if I were more honest, because each time these dreams never failed to scare out of me. Every time it felt more surreal, I could feel the pain in each of my dreams. It always made me wake up breathless, drenched in my own sweat. Even though it was a dream, I knew it wasn't just an ordinary dream. It didn't feel like just a dream to me, it felt like a time from before that I couldn't remember. That made me have more and more questions. I sighed in my frustration. The hairs on my skin stood on high alert, jolting me from my deep thoughts. We were in the mountains already. On cue, Mason pulled a hand in the air, and on cue, all the warriors halted on their horses. I pulled my horse to a stop beside Betrayal, whom I shot a questioning gaze. Some of the warriors on their horses pulled back to where I was, circling me, while Mason and a few of the warriors jumped down from their horses, shifting into their wolf forms, their noses stuck in the air, sniffling around. Something was wrong. I could feel something off happening here. Betrayal moved closer to me on her horse. My brown eyes were now very cautious and guarded. My ears picked up a weird sound. The more I listened, the closer it seemed to be drawing to where we were. It happened so fast, before I could register anything, I heard Adie's sharp warning in the back of my mind. "Duck!" my wolf commanded. My body instantly obeyed before asking any further questions. I leaned into my horse and, just on cue, stray arrows kept flying blindly in the air in every direction. "Take cover!" I heard Betrayal's voice beside me scream. Loud growls rang in the air as warriors began to shift into their wolves. I jumped down from my horse, grabbing onto the short length of the sword that was on my horse as I managed to abscond the arrows heading my way. The arrows kept flying around, hitting a few of the warriors, who let out a growl in pain. "The arrows are poisonous, laced with wolfsbane," a warrior shouted, warning us all, and an arrow grazed through my right arm. It wasn't too deep, but my skin burned with pain from the effect of the poison. The chaos that accompanied the flying arrows caused all the horses to flee for safety. Suddenly, many vicious-looking wolves emerged from the mountains to attack us. They were in massive numbers, we were all surrounded. Killian's point of view, I couldn't understand why I felt so uneasy. My mind constantly kept going straight back to Sheila. I made sure Mason went with her to ensure there wouldn't be any problems on the way. Mason was one of the best protectors in the pack, and I trusted him with my life. He was a loyal friend and wouldn't hesitate to give his life for me. And I expected that same loyalty towards Sheila. I knew she would do just fine with the meeting at the Diamond Pack. Sheila's a strong woman, and she has good leadership qualities. I was so proud of her. I knew she was safe with both Mason and Betrayal, but I couldn't stop the nagging of my wolf, Riker. It was as though he sensed she was in danger, and wanted me next to her desperately. I couldn't tell if he was serious or just wanted me away from Thea and next to my mate, Sheila. I want the same right now. I should have gone with her. Rage and annoyance began pumping through my veins as I realized bitterly that I didn't want to be here with Thea. It wasn't only Riker this time, I, as well, preferred to be in the company of Sheila. My hand clenched hard on the quill pen in my grip. I groaned internally, placing my other hand against my temple as my head throbbed. A string of curses threatened to escape my lips as Thea's voice kept filtering into my ears. For the first time, I hated the sound of her voice and her short chuckles. What was wrong with me? I dropped the pen in my hand on the journal I was working on, my amber eyes lazily falling on Thea, who was seated right opposite my chair in my office. She has stuck by my side the whole of today. And now I am in dire need of some freedom. It wasn't her fault though, I had brought this upon myself. I watched how her lips moved non-stop. I didn't even know what she was yapping about. I had stopped paying attention a long time ago. The only thought that occupied my mind was anything that had to do with my mate. The restlessness of Riker and me only increased with each second that ticked by. Sheila was becoming a drug to me, one that I was slowly getting addicted to, and that threatened both my peace of mind and my existence. Alpha, I heard faintly through the mind link. It was Betrayal. Immediately, I leaned forward, alarmed. Sheila is in danger. Her words sounded ragged through the mind link. Fear quickly engulfed me, swallowing me whole. My heart hammered loudly against my chest as my brain tried to catch up with the emotions attacking me all at once. I shot up from the chair. Thea followed my action and got up from her chair. What happened, Killian? My head pounded as my gaze swept over Thea without actually seeing her. All I could hear was Betrayal's words repeating in my head over and over. I struggled to stay focused as I tried to trace their location from the mind link, clinging to the weak connection from Betrayal as I tried to find where they were. They were in the southern mountains. It was far away from North Central. My fear quickly grew. There was no way I could get to them right on time. Even at my fastest, it'll take a few hours. There was no time to waste. I hurried to the door when Thea grabbed my arm. I have to go, I said, pulling away from her. But you promised to spend the day with me. She reminded him, grabbing my arm once more. I was running out of patience to the point that if she grabbed me one more time I could snap at her. I am sorry, I said hoarsely, rushing out of the office without a second thought. Killian, I heard her call behind me, but I ignored her. Sheila was in danger, and that was the only thing on my mind. I had to get to her and bring her to safety before I completely went insane. I mind-linked Morgan and Alan, informing them of the news. We had to get them immediately. I couldn't connect to Mason. I had a bad feeling, but I tried not to think much. I might die. Immediately, the Pax warriors assembled in front of the castle, and they were told that Luna's life was in danger. I shared Sheila's current location with them, and they sprinted off. I turned to Morgan. He was also in his wolf form. He was thinking exactly what I was thinking. There was no way we'd get to them in time, even with our wolves. But Valerie could. Hurry up to them, brother, not only Sheila but everyone is in danger, I said to him. He nodded, and I watched him race off. I rushed into the castle, heading to Valerie's spell room. I reached in front of the door, but I couldn't get in. Only those with magic could get it to open, so I ended up calling out her name. The door squeaked open. Valerie hurried to me, worriedly. I need to get to the southern mountains, I said to her, watching her confused gaze. Sheila is in danger. So, will you please help me?" I sighed in relief when she didn't ask any further questions. She led me in and hastened to the table in the corner. Her hands were searching through the cluster of things. She grabbed some items and hurried to my side. "I haven't been there, so I can't transport you exactly to the mountains, but I can send you somewhere close," she said, and I nodded, not minding at all. I was familiar with this. Witches could only transport someone to locations that they are familiar with. She drew a circle around me with her fingers in the air, and strange markings appeared on the floor. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded. She started chanting, her hands skillfully moving in the air. Soon Valerie's eyes began to glow a bright purple and I was surrounded by a strong wind. Slowly, my surroundings became blurry and soon started changing. I found myself in the middle of the woods. The surroundings were familiar, and I only had to head south to reach the southern mountains. I gave Riker full permission to share partial control with me. It would be faster to reach the mountains and find my mate if we were both in control. My eyes began to glow brightly, and my nails extended from the tips. I felt the ache in my teeth as my sharp canines lengthened at once. "Let's find Sheila at once," I whispered under my breath to Riker. He growled, agreeing with a nod. Immediately, I raced through the woods at my non-human speed. I continued running without taking a pause. After running a long distance, I finally arrived at the southern mountains. The fight was still ongoing. I jumped in on the ongoing fight between my warriors and wolves. They weren't rogues. They belonged to the Fire Crest Pack. An enemy pack outside the walls of North Central. Their territory was to the south. They were vicious beasts that infiltrated the capital and foolishly came for my pack, hoping to conquer my territory. But at the end of the war, the Fire Crest Pack lost more than they bargained for, including the life of their Alpha's brother. They had a strong grudge against me. They must have found out that Sheila was my mate, and they attacked just to get to her. I scanned around, but I couldn't find Sheila, Betrayal, or Mason. I tried to link to Mason but it wasn't connecting. Where in the could he be at a time like this? I had to know what situation Sheila was in. No one knew where Sheila, Betrayal, nor Mason were. I stuck my nose in the air, tracing Sheila's scent. It was faint, but I could work with it. I followed her scent. It led me deeper into the mountains. My heart hammered as I noticed a trail of blood. It belonged to Sheila. I raced faster. From afar, I saw several wolves gathering around Sheila. She was at the edge of a cliff, fighting. I growled ragingly. The wolf's attention snapped to me, and Sheila's gaze momentarily traveled to me. I leaped into the air, fighting off the wolves, landing right in front of Sheila. I tilted my head to get closer, my eyes scanning her. She didn't seem injured, but there was a small amount of blood on the side of her head. I growled more. In a haste, Riker and I pierced through the wolves that lunged at us, ensuring Sheila remained safe behind us. And I thought she was. Not until I heard the frightful cry that left her lips. It spelled more danger.